and starting now. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. We appreciate you guys taking your time this afternoon to join us for the Nonprofit State of the Industry Update. My name is Kim Anselmo and I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items to get us started. Just to let you know, we are in a Zoom webinar today, and on the control panel at the bottom you should see, or wherever your control panel is sitting, you should see an option for a Q&A chat box, as well as an additional chat box. So if you do have questions, we please encourage you to ask them throughout this webinar. We will get to them as live as we possibly can. And with that, I do want to go ahead and hand it over to our presenters today. We have Dean and Brenda and John. If you guys can take a moment to introduce yourselves to our group, that would be great.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brenda Kahler. I am the head of our nonprofit client engagement team here at Armanino. So my job is to keep a pulse on the industry. And so we thought it would be a good idea to share what we have learned today. And I will hand it over to Dean.
Hello, everyone. Dean Quiambao, Chief Relationship Partner here at Armanino. I've been working with nonprofits for almost 20 years now. Very excited to share some of what is the latest and greatest info for nonprofits today.
So Dean, you started this when you were 5. I get it. That's great. That's great.
You're so good to me, John. You're so good to me.
John, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, everybody. John Stewart here, Managing Director of our Strategy Transformation Practice here at Armanino. You can think of that as our management consulting arm of the firm. Nonprofit is a very large industry and sector for us and priority. So happy to be here on the panel and discussing where we're going with it.
That's me. Sorry, guys. So in terms of what we're seeing, we're going to touch on a number of things today, but overall, I wanted to highlight 5 big trends that we're seeing across all of our nonprofits, regardless of sector. The first one is year-end fundraising campaigns are kind of make or break in terms of what people are seeing in terms of revenue. Like these year-end campaigns are going to be real important, engaging new donors, doubling down with major donors, going to foundations and securing that additional funding to make up any shortfalls. The other thing is PPP loan forgiveness. A lot of our nonprofit clients applied for and luckily received PPP loans. So those applications are due at the end of this month. There's a lot of complicated calculations that seem like they're changing on a daily basis, even though I'm sure it's not quite that often, but we want to make sure that we're there to support our clients in that as well. The third one is uncertainty in terms of governmental funding sources. There's always a level of uncertainty anytime we're talking about an election year, which of course this is, but especially just given, all the different stimulus and the PPP and the CARES Act, all of these different things are leading to governmental source funding being a little uncertain. And they've come up with guidance that you can't do any double dipping. So if it's reimbursed under a grant, you can't do it under PPP. So that makes it a little bit more complicated when talking about calculations for either of those things. Given our unprecedented times, we keep hearing that phrase, the AICPA has also released additional guidance for audit committees in terms of things that they should be asking of their management team, probably a lot of you, related to COVID-19. So there is that checklist, what should you be looking at in terms of risk assessment? And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is just cybersecurity. Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so a lot of the fraudsters have used this opportunity to pose as an organization giving out fire relief. You know, here in the Bay Area, that's been a big thing for us, to hack into computers. Everybody's working from home. Those security systems might not be as robust as if you were sitting in the office. And so we're definitely seeing an increase in that as well. So with that, we wanted to go ahead and actually get a little information from all of you before we dive into the panel discussion. Kim, can you go ahead and launch the first polling question? Looks like we've got all the polling questions. Good thing that we're not doing CPE, but if you would just go ahead and take a moment, what we're kind of looking for is, what are you seeing here? Compared to your nonprofit's prior year budget, what has been your decline in program service revenue? Approximations here are good. What's your
Brenda, while you're doing that, we had a couple questions on the PPP forgiveness. If you look in the chat, I want to make sure you're able to address those.
Sure. Let me just read through these questions first for everybody. What are your expectations regarding your funding for the next 18 months compared to last year? Declines or increase or no change? Besides revenue, what are the biggest challenges you expect as a result of the pandemic or are experiencing? You might be experiencing a lot of this information right now. As a finance leader, how has your job changed? We know that everybody's job has changed a little or a lot. And then lastly, we'll be looking to do more of these types of webinars or podcast perhaps in the future. So if you would like to be considered to be our guest speaker, please let us know and we will go ahead and reach out to set something up to hear from you what you are doing. In terms of PPP, there seems to be a lot of questions on that. The document I was looking at said it was due at the end of this month. That may be a particular bank, so we'll have to look into that.
Brenda, I'm seeing answers all over the place. We're gonna have to kind of break this apart and kind of give answers. I think that some of the information we'll give will be contrasting as well, right? We're starting to see that in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Okay, we've got about 72% of you have voted, so go ahead and just take a few more minutes and then we'll close the poll shortly.
And then I guess, Kim, are we seeing, is the chat is it public? I saw someone said that they're not seeing anything in the chat. I will say that Matt Trosky from our tax department, who's heading up the PPP for our nonprofits, is saying that we have plenty of time for the PPP. So we don't have to worry about it at the end of the month, so we're good. We will figure all that out.
Perfect, thank you, Matt. Addressing the chat and the comments. So in the chat box, the default is sending all comments to all panelists. In that drop down, you can go ahead and change it to all panelists and attendees, and then everybody will see your comments in the chat. Okay. Kim, can we go ahead and close the polls? We've got about 75% of the folks. All right, so on this first question, we had said most people are seeing a decline between 10 and 25%. That's consistent with what we had seen at the beginning of the pandemic in our survey that we did at that time. So it looks like things haven't gotten too much better, but they haven't gotten worse either. So that's pretty good. In terms of expectation for funding for the next 18 months, it looks like the majority of people are looking at a decline of less than 25%. So that's good. Hopefully everybody's got a good end of year fundraising campaign planned.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, look at the interesting piece is that the second largest component is a increase or no change. So we can talk about that here shortly as well, Brenda.
Yep, definitely seeing that in the social services sector, who have seen a big increase in the need for their services. And luckily funders have responded as well. Besides revenue, biggest challenges, of course, are changes to overall operations, looking at all of the things that need to change as a result of everybody working from home. Changes may be needed in your reserve or investment policies. Lot of things going on. And then as a finance leader, how has your job changed? So revamping processes, procedures, and technologies is definitely the winner in that category, with increased time spent on cash management and forecasts, a close second. Not a big surprise there. And it looks like we did get a few volunteers, Kim, so we will follow up with you on those after this webinar. Great to see that. Thank you so much. So in terms of kind of digging down into some of this in terms of what we're seeing in the market, looks like my question went away. My whole computer just froze.
Don't you love that when we're doing a live broadcast?
Technology, right?
That's how it works. Yeah.
Let me relaunch. Am I frozen?
No, we can see you fine.
Oh, that's good.
I think what we were going to talk about, Brenda, while you're relaunching, I can help you. So, I think, Dean, we wanted to kind of implore you to kind of share some knowledge about how nonprofits are broadening their revenue base during this time period.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I was doing a lot of research on that, and there was a couple things that I thought were some trends that I thought we should highlight. Though we are seeing the funding resources all over the place, we are seeing it all over the place. We're seeing opportunities that actually, fundraising in Q1 was down 6%, right? Overall fundraising. And Q2 was actually a 5-year high. So if you actually were to take the first half of 2020 and compare it to 2019, according to the Chronicle of Philanthropy, giving is actually up almost 8%. And I thought that was, wow, that was very, very interesting. The other interesting component of that was where the donations were coming from, John and Brenda, was that it wasn't from the quote unquote mid-level donors or major donors, it was actually from the small donations, right? The amount of millennials that are giving was actually 75% of millennials have given to a charity or gone to help another one of their family members or friends that were in financial need. But with that said, major donors, their gifts were up, or I'd say mid-level donors, which are defined between $250 and $1,000, their giving was up 8%, and major donors was actually up 6%. And that could be because of, in the CARES Act, there was the $300 universal charitable deduction, which we've talked about on past nonprofit webinars. That's there and available. Small donations are up 19% in the first half of 2020 versus 2019. I thought this was all very, very, very interesting. Some of the other things is you have to think about is what are the assets that have appreciated this year? And if you think about just the impact of COVID on financial markets, you know, let's face it, tech stocks are still on fire. It is still very much IPO mania. SPAC mania is going on Wall Street right now. And so there are those donors, those major donors that are able to give more. One of the things that's also up this year, and not a lot of people think about it, digital assets, cryptocurrencies, right, John? We just talked about what's going on with that. And if you look at it, I know Fidelity Investments just came out, and now they're allowing their portfolios to carry digital assets. So that is an asset class that is on the rise. We are starting to see nonprofits accept that as gifts. If you go to numerous websites, I know one of them is Guide Dogs for the Blind. They're 100% funded through donations, and you can now donate through their website via cryptocurrency. I think that these are some of the major trends. And then the other one I think is out there is the fact that the reality that, you know, everybody was talking about, is it going to be a V-shaped recovery? Is it going to be a W, right? I think if you watch the debate, they talked about a K-shaped recovery, which is going really well for some and really hard for others. And what that is saying, and I read this article in the Harvard Business Review, was that you really right now gotta stay close to those major donors, because even though things are up in the first half of 2020 via the Chronicle of Philanthropy, people are very worried about what the second half of 2020 looks like. Is there going to be donor fatigue? Is there going to be things like that coming? Because we know the need, as you talked about, Brenda, earlier, for these social service organizations and for all of these nonprofits, the need isn't going away. And just what does that look like going forward? So that, I think that is kind of consistent to what we have seen in the survey earlier, is that, you know, we're seeing a wide range, but definitely leaning in and engaging and telling that story right now of what you need and how it's going to help, right? That transparent story right now for all nonprofits into their community, I feel like is resonating for everyone.
Yeah, and I think in one of our recent conferences, I think it was the Evolution conference, we had a segment on no, it was the symposium. We did a segment on storytelling, like how do you tell your story with our AMF division on how to effectively get that story out and leverage that into more revenue. So I think that's definitely still top of mind, because people really want to hear those stories and how people are reacting.
Yeah, absolutely. And with regards to that data, we can definitely, I'll pull the link and I'll share it with you. There was an article just recently released at the end of September, early October, by the Chronicle of Philanthropy on all of that data.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. So, besides revenue, what else are we seeing clients do in this downturn? And maybe that's a question for you, John. We know people are focused on increasing the revenue, but if they happen to be in a good position financially, what kinds of projects are nonprofits focusing on outside of the day-to-day?
Yeah, well, I think COVID's brought a lot of changes to us, right, as we all know. And I think one of the things, and Dean, I'm going to steal your line here, that, you know, we're hearing is called the Great Reset. And I think we're seeing that in the nonprofit sector as well, right? People, and our survey is evident of that. People are looking back at operations and say, okay, we've got a time now to fix some things. Let's get smarter, let's get leaner, let's get faster. And how do you do that, right, effectively, right? Because there's, as we're talking about, there's limited dollars to spend right now, right? We can't just throw everything at it. So we're seeing clients reach out with, hey, how can I optimize my improvements? Where do I hunt best? Where am I going to get the best bang for my buck, so to speak? So we're doing a lot around automation and process improvement across the board, not just in the nonprofit sector, but specifically there as well. Particularly around robotic process automation, RPA. It's a big movement right now across a lot of different industries. Nonprofit is not excluded from that. We're seeing huge uptick in use cases there. And I can go into further, Brenda, if you want me to.
Yeah, I mean, RPA is so cool. My only disappointment with it is there's no actual robots involved.
Not yet, not that we're aware of. No.
I think can you help us kind of demystify what RPA is, what robotic process automation, because we hear these words, but how can it help me today as a nonprofit executive? What are these little robots that aren't actual robots going to do for me?
Right. So yeah, first thing is it's not a robot, right? It sounds fun to say, but it's not. It'd be cool if it was maybe, but it's not. So you think of it as it's process automation. It's a software program. What makes this thing an advantage to really any organization is that it's technology agnostic, meaning you can play it against any of your technology applications you have in-house. There's really no limit to that. It doesn't matter. You train it to be able to log in and log out of the applications. It is essentially, think of it as a macro on steroids, right? But it doesn't exist in Excel. It exists wherever you want it to. It runs on its own computer nonstop. So it's a digital worker, right? We have people that name the bots, Brenda. I'm not joking. We have clients naming the bots. It is a digital worker. It runs 24/7. It doesn't take coffee breaks, doesn't take vacation, doesn't have to pretend they're a substitute first grade teacher, which I'm poor at. So it doesn't have to do any of those things. And we optimize it to work with any process that we're really looking at that needs that efficiency gain.
So what's an example of a process that you could automate for any nonprofit client?
So I'll give you two, actually. So one is just kind of general across the board for really any firm that's looking to do this. Is going to be looking at your lower level accounting and finance processes. Think AP, AR, payroll. These are manually based, high task oriented processes that you can easily automate with a bot. We have a number of use cases where we see teams spending 10, 15 hours a week trying to run through an AP process. We can have a bot do it in 4 minutes, and that's a real number. So we're finding ways to put bots in place that can really make the back office, the back of house, really more dynamic. Shift your time to value-added strategic thinking and adding value to the mission, right? As opposed to having to continue to do these tactical work. You can have the digital worker do that. More specific to nonprofit, think of it from a grant funnel perspective, right? I am positive, we're hearing it from others, but people on this call today are overwhelmed with the amount of grant requests or trying to hunt for the right ones. You can program a bot to actually sift through this inbox, right? The deluge that you get hit with, you can have the bot sift through that based on the criteria you want to set up and dig through it on its own time so that it's highlighting to you the critical few you should spend your time on. So we're finding a lot of gains here where bots can really add a lot of value on the ground. Really think of it more as almost like a staff augmentation, but in a very economical way, because that's the last part. These are fast to deploy, and it's very economical as well.
Awesome. And so I think what we're thinking of is like how to automate those routine high volume tasks. So the bot can read your AP email, discern what information in that is important, import that into your ERP system, and based on the due date, put it into the correct check run and send it for approval before they actually cut a check.
Yeah, and I believe it was slide. Why don't we throw up a slide to give everybody a visual here, just so you can kind of describe more visually what we're talking about here. Yeah, these bots can be programmed to really pretty much do anything you want them to do. But let's start with the 4 most common use cases. So this is something I think everybody on this call should be thinking about and how it could apply to their business and their nonprofit. Manual data entry, right? We talked a little bit about that. Manipulating formatting data. So anytime we're trying to download things out of an email into Excel, we have to manipulate it to get it back into something else or a report. The bot can handle literally every step.
Or you said payroll earlier. I know that's something that everybody struggles with, is downloading the payroll and then loading it into the financial system so that you've got that information by grant or project to be able to request a reimbursement. And so you're telling me that I can have a process that will download it, format it, and then upload it.
And reconcile it. Yeah, no, we're doing this live with other nonprofits right now to make this operation smooth and succinct and actually just real time just runs, right? You put these on schedules too, so they run as much as frequently as you want them to. You can look at communication between your systems to optimize that. Action trigger, like we all get it, right? Notifications come into our inbox. I need to approve something. Well, or I need to review to approve. You can have the bot handle most of this and highlight the exceptions. So in general, what we're seeing is the shift from management by rule to management by exception. And that's freeing up time for everybody to focus on better ways to add value to the mission, right? And that's why I really feel passionate about how you can apply bots today in the nonprofit space to really optimize what you guys are trying to do.
And I know working with nonprofits over the past several decades that, you know, we're always looking to optimize our dollars. If we've got one more dollar to spend, how can that have the greatest impact on the programs? How can we make a bigger difference? And so in this time when we're dealing with staff reductions and furloughs in many cases, sometimes working with reduced staff, we still have the same amount of work. And so it sounds like this might be a process to consider, you know, if we are looking to make up time in terms of getting all of that work
your
done.
Workforce. Leverage your workforce. I kind of always break it down between strategical work, right? Strategic work and tactical work. And can you get the bot to focus on the tactical aspects to let you and your team focus on the strategic work at hand? And that's what this tool will do really, really well.
John, this sounds like some high-tech, high-fun stuff, but this sounds like what the Googles of the world are doing. This sounds what they do at Salesforce and Apple and Microsoft. Are nonprofits really doing this right now? Are nonprofits in COVID going through digital transformations and using sounds cool, but expensive. Are nonprofits going through digital transformations right now in COVID, putting in RPAs? Is that something that's happening right now?
I can say emphatically yes. We have a number of nonprofit clients that we're already doing this for right now. It is not as expensive as cool as it sounds. I agree.
That's
but
very
it is
cool.
not. It's actually really economical. Yeah. It's a fraction of an FTE cost to deploy and get it live. You can deploy it really quickly too, Dean, right? We're standing up bots in a number of weeks. This is not a long process to do this. It really does need to be
longer to hire people.
What was that, Brenda?
I said it definitely takes longer than 2 weeks to hire people.
Yes, it does. It does. And I see a question income. It says, so cool. We're in the process of evaluating Sage Intacct for ERP. Does Intacct have any built-in RPAs? It does not, but there are third parties that integrate very cleanly. In fact, we're a go-to-market platform partner for Auditoria, which is a great platform for RPA that plugs right into Intacct, pre-built RPA bots that you just have to configure and go. So there's ways to do this, again, really, really succinctly, really quickly, and economical for what you guys are trying to achieve.
And another question, I like this one. Thank you, Lori. Can it be used, hold on one second. Can it be used to take data to put into an online form and enter it into our database? Is that something that a bot can do?
I feel like Lori's teeing me up. It's great. So yes, a bot can easily do that. And in fact, it's a very popular use case that we can actually take and manipulate and move data around, let the bot do that for you. So then you can spend your time analyzing and determining the insights off the data, not just trying to get the data right.
And I think that's where it gets exciting, right? Not just the very basic task of AP and payroll and things of that nature, but what I'm starting to see here and what we've talked about is solutioning for bigger problems, right? Like, what are our bigger problems? Like I know you talked about the grant receipt cycle or application cycle for foundations. They receive so many grants. They have to go through and filter through all of them. You know, could that become something that could filter through and allow them to assess the stability and financial stability and programmatic impact of the nonprofits that are applying, rather than just giving it to the ones that they know have historically always do it. They know, they're tried, they're true. It allows for, you know, a broader, maybe a broader range of recipients.
Yep, I think so. I think this is a really cool tool to be considering. And again, I think it fits well to the nonprofit mission at hand, right? This is a tool that actually enables you to be more optimal to the mission, to the member, to your constituents. This is a tool that allows you to do that in a little more efficient way. Absolutely.
You know, John, what I've heard though, oh, sorry, Brenda.
No,
you know,
I
what
was
I've heard, go for it.
You're perfect. Sorry.
I was just going to say that, you know, I think that, okay, fine, maybe it's not that expensive and maybe it's not just for the leading tech companies of the world, but still the reality is that we have a lot of people that are going to be down this year in revenue. They're going to be down this year in fundraising. Are people able to go to major donors right now and try to get something like this funded? Is digital transformation, RPAs, is this something that major donors today are getting behind and supporting even in kind of a down period?
Yeah, we're seeing that actually. So in one instance, we're working with a museum fine arts client that is doing the exact same thing. They want to automate a lot of the front of house and the back of house, and we want to deploy bots to do a lot of that. And this is the exact pitch they went to a donor with, and it was well received, right? It was, this is exactly this type of stuff I want you to bring to me, is what we heard. Because this is what's going to move them forward and keep them in a more profitable position moving forward, right? So anything that's going to clean up that and automate and allow you to just focus on the services you're providing, that's a great tool. So yeah, no, we're finding that it lands really well, and it's just fine. It's just optimizing to what is the process you want to start with, and how can we get in there and test and make sure it's going to work.
That's so cool, John. I love to hear that. I just have to acknowledge one of our former CFO of the year recipients, J. Mark Jenkins. I see his comment here in the chat, and that's why you're CFO of the year, J. Mark. Look at this. We just implemented a bot in SharePoint to allow us to process employee acknowledgement of a revised expense reimbursement policy and supervisory approvals authorizations. AP has that list that shows the approval that have been processed, and the bot delivers status updates to participants in the process real time. That's awesome.
That's
That's
fantastic.
in the real life. That's all you can ask for. It's making an impact on what we're doing. And like you said, allows people in the organization to focus on the mission and its effectiveness. So that's great to see. What's our next question?
So
Go ahead.
you said, John, that it's not going to break the bank. So when we're thinking about how to look and how to approach, a digital transformation, a strategy assessment, a risk assessment, because we've got a lot of additional risks, with all of our staff working from home, people in different places, you've had to revamp all your policies and procedures. What would you think is the first step, for a nonprofit that's looking to do a strategy assessment?
The first one is to engage with us. We make this really easy, right? We go through feasibility analysis first. Let's find the right process, the right way that you're operating that's going to give the biggest ROI. Because the best part of RPA, one of the other features, right, is it's hard ROI. We can measure it. We can know the impact it's going to have, because we're talking about taking hard hours out of someone's day or multiple people's days, right? So we can measure this, and we try to do that upfront with a modeler. We built a bunch of different models that will run through this to highlight where can we get that, which also helps you sell it through your organization too. When you actually have a hard ROI, you can start touting around to your leaders, say, listen, there's a reason we want this tool. Look what the benefit's going to be. And in every case we're seeing is an ROI that comes back in year one, if not faster than that. So it's something we're happy to analyze and partner with you on and help you with and determine the right way to optimize your operations for sure. And I think part of looking at that risk, Brenda, though, I kind of toss one back to you, is also, you mentioned cyber earlier. As we're talking forward-looking tech tools, can you walk us through, cybersecurity is an important topic, but even so more of a concern right now. So can you give us some real life examples and lesson learned of how you're seeing that apply right now as well?
Yeah, and it's a timely question. So I'm sure everybody by now has heard of and or been affected by the Blackbaud breach. I'm sure everybody got those notices. I know I received a number of them as a donor from nonprofits saying that there had been a Blackbaud breach and data may have been compromised. Which, it's all very vague, right? It doesn't leave you feeling very settled. So Blackbaud, had a risk, and they paid their ransom, and they got a fair amount of flack for that. So it's one thing to think about, as these cyber attacks become more common, people know that nonprofits are a data rich environment. We've got a lot of information on our donors. often very wealthy individuals with addresses and confidential information there. So it's a rich target. So thinking about how you as an organization might respond if you were ever the victim of some ransomware. Recently, we had a client as things were just starting to lock down. They had deployed their workforce to work from home, and they hadn't yet been able to do security checks on all their home equipment. And one staff person connected a computer to the network. They were using Office 365, and that old computer that they booted up and connected to the network had some ransomware on it. So the bad part is the ransomware was so old that nobody was following up to see if anybody was answering it. And so that was the kicker. So they couldn't even pay had they wanted to get their data back. So they ended up losing about 6 months of data, which we then helped them rebuild. So keeping in mind, that it could be a completely innocent situation as well. So there's that. There's the Blackbaud breach. And as I mentioned, fraudsters. Fraudsters are always looking to capitalize on a crisis. And so COVID-19 charities being set up to collect donations that are not a nonprofit. So making sure you're vetting your own personal donations as well as donations received by your organization, before you cash that check. Is this from a real organization, or am I gonna, further contribute to this fraud? So thinking about all of the different ways that, especially we talked earlier about a digital transformation, everything's on the cloud now. So since everything else is in the cloud, you're much more susceptible to other people's gates. So if you don't have a policy already, making sure you're getting those SOC 1 reports, those SOC 2 reports, to be able to review the controls that your cloud organizations have in place, because listed in those reports is always a list of things that you also have to have in place in order for their controls to work effectively. And a lot of organizations miss that aspect of it. So,
Brenda, on that topic, one thing I've seen working really well, here at Armanino, we developed an anomaly detection tool, and I see that being deployed to find those risk points, quickly highlight them, and let companies and firms and nonprofits know, okay, here's a spot you're going to want to focus on that you could be susceptible here. And I see that adding already a lot of value to clients. I don't know how broadly everybody knows about it, but it's a good tool to inquire about if you're curious.
Yeah, and that tool, for me, I really like that tool because my background, as a controller, as a nonprofit, I was managing a team of about 90 accountants across 24 countries. And so I couldn't review every journal entry on a journal entry by journal. It was just too much data. And so an analytical review was the only way I could really effectively review my business. And looking at the fraud tool that we released for nonprofits, seeing a lot of the analytics that they're performing were much higher level than the ones that I was performing on my own, trying to get a handle of fluctuations, anomalies, outliers. So all of those different tests are really neat. So if you've got a large volume organization, or I used to say a distributed organization, but I think everybody has a distributed organization these days, it's definitely something to think about implementing as part of your risk assessment and controls.
Yeah, Brenda, speaking about risk assessments and controls and cyber risk assessments and all of that, the interesting thing is that, we've been talking about that for years as a best practice, right? But the reality is that doing those types of assessments have never really been fun or sexy or exactly what organizations want to put money towards. But one of the big learnings from COVID is that this COVID time is that, yeah, that's absolutely necessary. And we're seeing all the organizations go back and now wanting to know, where are they susceptible? Where are they susceptible from a financial point of view? Where are they susceptible from a cyber point of view? They just want to know, like, what am I not seeing around the corner? That is a major trend that COVID has accentuated. Like, yeah, all those types of assessments we want to do now because we want to know. Are you guys seeing the same thing? Brenda, is that something you're seeing when you're talking to nonprofits as well, is willing to go ahead and say, yeah, you know, that cyber risk assessment that we did not do, we want to go ahead and do now? Is that fair?
Well, yes and no. I mean, as with a cybersecurity, risk assessment, as with a fraud risk assessment, it tends to go really high on people's list once they've experienced it. So, if you think of it more like a preventative tool, like a trip to the dentist, I know there was one point where I skipped going to the dentist for 6 years and I ended up with $10,000 worth of dental work after insurance. So this is the same thing. If you invest in those annual checkups right now, that will hopefully prevent a large expenditure in the future when something actually does go wrong. So if you're not experiencing fraud and other issues, I think this is a perfect time to really look at it so you get an understanding of what your baseline is.
That's great. That's great. That's great. I do see a question here with regards to smaller and smaller pool of government funding. One of our participants has said that they've also found that banks and other lending groups have become increasingly unfriendly towards nonprofits to the point that they are unable to secure credit. Any suggestions? I would say that you definitely go to a bank that specializes in nonprofit and maybe specializes in the type of nonprofit that you are, whether it's a social service, a foundation, private school. I don't know the exact type of nonprofit that you are, but here in Armanino, we are very friendly with numerous banks that specialize in nonprofits, and they have actually told us that they are actually being very aggressive in the marketplace for nonprofits that have a proven track record of financial sustainability. There are opportunities right now for refinancing. We know that interest rates are at all time.
Uh-oh, is that me?
No, that was Dean. Oh, he's back. We got him back.
I'm back. I'm sorry. We know that interest rates are at all-time lows, and we're seeing refinancing of debt obligations and taking advantage of that. So we are hearing that there are numerous banks that are aggressively looking for new nonprofit clients right now.
I will say, as my experience, as a controller, just I think in general, as a nonprofit, there's a few additional hoops to jump through anytime you're looking for line of credit or financing, just because there is no owner of the business that can personally guarantee that loan should you default on it. And so that's why I think Dean's advice of working with a bank that specializes in nonprofit, that understands what unrestricted net assets are versus temporarily restricted net assets, and that understands the business model, I think is going to be the key. I was about to say we don't usually see a lot of nonprofits go out of business, but I don't know that that's true anymore.
Well, you know what? And I think that right now we're also, when you talk about the state of the industry and you talk about trends, M&A, I'd say in the first 19 years of my career, Brenda, I saw 2 nonprofit M&As. Now I'm hearing about it all over the place. People like John, we said it earlier, the Great Reset, everybody is reimagining everything, right? The K-8 down the street is looking at the high school down the street saying, hey, should we merge and make it a K-12? We're looking at organizations of similar missions and saying, hey, should we merge? Everything is on the table right now. And that is another one that organizations are looking to combine forces and potentially thrive in the future. So that M&A is real in nonprofit right now.
I'm really excited to hear that, Dean, because for the longest time I've thought, I have a lot of people always ask me, oh, Brenda, I'm looking to start a nonprofit. What's your advice? And my advice is always don't don't do it. Like, find a nonprofit that's doing exactly what you want to do in your area and donate that money to them, donate that time to them, because there's so many nonprofits doing the same thing with the duplication of administrative costs and operating overhead, where I think a little consolidation in our industry might be a good thing.
Well, and the reality is that there's lots of, the bigger brands in nonprofit, and then you have the fringe, right? The folks that are on the side that are smaller, that are kind of unique, and they have their own special little laser focused mission. And those are the ones that we're most worried about, right? The smaller ones are on the side, and how can they pair with other organizations that are like-minded and continue the effectiveness of the program.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're hearing right now, Brenda, and John, is nonprofits that are engaging their community in a way that maybe they haven't done in the past. Have they opened new programs? Are they doing new things? What examples are we hearing? And I know I have a couple of different new partnerships that people are exploring. I know that my wife was a bar method instructor for a long time, a fitness instructor, and that organization couldn't operate because of COVID. And then you had some of the local performing arts organizations, and they couldn't operate because of COVID. And I saw a partnership where they were leasing out their facility, the performing arts facility was leasing out their space to the gym, so they could use it and turn it into a ballet bar studio. And we're starting to see lots of different partnerships like that, where you would never imagine that in the past. But now, because of the period that we're in, everybody is looking at ways to collaborate with the greater community.
And I imagine in some of those cases, Dean, there might be some unrelated business income implications to some of that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, especially when you have bond obligations and all of that. But I think that, definitely have your 990 prepared, ask them the questions ahead of time, look at all those rental agreements ahead of time and be ahead of the curve. But I think that when you talk about revenue and you talk about engaging the community, I saw the New York Philharmonic, they're now becoming mobile. We saw organizations, other fine arts organizations that are doing online tours. We're starting to do so many more things where people are engaging the community, the local community, and even a national community. I know Kim worked with the Grand Ole Opry to do a virtual tour for them, that people are reimagining their program and the delivery of how they work.
And Dean, on top of that, what we're seeing, I mean, and this is the tech guy talking. So, when they're doing these virtual things, what they're finding, right? And for those who haven't tried any of this stuff, when they're doing these virtual or online events, tours or whatnot, you're finding that the data that gets to the member, to the constituent, is rich. And when you can capture that data, you can harness it and you can use it to then continue to reach out. And that connects back to the revenue stream. So we're seeing a whole different life cycle develop online for some of these performing arts and fine arts organizations that previously really weren't maybe primarily focusing there, but obviously have had to, given the moment in time right.
Yeah, and some business models I think pivoted really cleanly. For example, I've been a volunteer with Junior Achievement for almost the last 2 decades. And, guess what? I've joined the ranks of online teachers. So, teaching Junior Achievement online, that model, you've got the course. It's actually even easier for me to teach one course a week because I don't have to get across town to an elementary school or a high school, all that travel time. It's just I log in for my hour, I teach the class, and then we're done. And so it's been interesting to see people in the different platforms and the tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and all kinds of new tools that are coming out all the time to help people, work in a distributed environment.
Yeah, Brenda, when it comes to that workplace collaboration software, that is really changing everything, right? Even with regards to location of our own employees, maybe John, they're not going to go down the path of the bot and the RPA. Maybe they're not going to go down that path, but I am hearing from nonprofits that are starting to look at hiring different folks in different locations across the country and using cloud-based work software, cloud-based accounting software, these collaboration tools, and saying, hey, I can hire that person. I'm in the Bay Area and I can hire that person in Ohio, or I'm on the East Coast and I can look at that person in another part of the country as a resource. I mean, people are just reimagining everything right now, and we're seeing that in lots of different ways.
And I know if Jem McCabe was on this, she would tell us if you're hiring people in other states, that there's also implications for your HR policies and procedures and payroll taxes for that as well. And, you know, if somebody's moving, for instance, from the Bay Area to Ohio, you know, you may want to update your policies and procedures to include a compensation review so that, yeah, you can work from anywhere, but we're going to adjust it to market based on where you're actually living.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, on the for-profit side, you know, we see that drives a lot of nexus questions as well with regards to state tax. I would say that we're also starting to see a lot of nonprofits look at the nonprofit for-profit partnership. We're seeing that more and more. Where can people collaborate with a for-profit and see if they can find impact for growth there as well.
Yep, both I think in terms of partnership and a lot more questions about a for-profit subsidiary, so they can, you know, make investments and, you know, donations in, you know, a space where they're limited from being able to do that as a nonprofit. I did see a great question in the chat that I want to make sure we address. What trends are we seeing in fundraising through online events? And that's a big one, of course, because there is no big gala, you know, and everybody's got their big annual gala. So reimagining that. So one example I like to share, we work with Special Olympics Illinois, and they do an annual duck derby. Where everybody purchases a duck and then they dump them into the Chicago River. And there's hundreds of thousands of these ducks that people have purchased. And then they fish one out of the river and that person rents a new car. And so they couldn't do this because the city of Chicago had said, nope, it's too many people are going to crowd the banks of the river. That's a terrible plan. So they did it virtually. And they had the drawing the same as normal, but everybody bought their ducks and they were able to do a drawing. So thinking about how to pivot your signature events into something that can be delivered in a virtual manner. In some cases, this is involved, you know, pivoting events. In some cases, it's required completely new events. John, Dean, what have you guys seen folks doing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely just revised galas, reconfigured, all of that. I think really, no matter what it's become, the end goal has been a very direct ask, and a pointed ask to where the dollars are going to go to and how they're going to be used and what the impact is going to be of those dollars, right? That is the most important thing. We saw it in our symposium, and we're still seeing it today, I think, most of all. And then lastly, just on this slide, Brenda, you know, this is kind of where we are today. And I think every organization is kind of somewhere on this spectrum of what we're calling the new normal, right? Hopefully everybody's moved on from the triage stage and we're kind of transitioning and trying to find a way to optimize where we are and hopefully get back to a growth cycle. You know, we at Armanino help organizations anywhere along this curve. We did our whole digital online evolution conference in the summer about this. If anyone has any questions about where you might be on this curve and how we might be able to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out, especially our nonprofit organizations. We want to make sure that you survive COVID and hopefully not just survive, but find a way to thrive through COVID as well. What are your thoughts, Brenda? Any last thoughts here as we come up to the top of the hour?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I like this slide a lot because everybody is going to fall somewhere on here. So figuring out where your organization is from a risk and process standpoint is really important, as most nonprofits right now are either in the middle of your audit or you're looking at budgeting for 2021 if you're a calendar year end. So knowing where you are in terms of your new normal business growth stage, I think is really helpful in terms of planning, like what are the next steps, and then what are our goals for 12 to 18 months out.
If I could add on, Dean and Brenda, I'd say don't fear the technology here. I think what we're seeing is this is the right time to look at the most optimal technology and get it in place now. And you're not alone in that search. You're not alone in feeling like you need to do that. A lot of your nonprofit colleagues are doing exactly that right now. And this is a great time to do that and look for the most effective way to do that. And we're here obviously to help and provide advisory however we can to help you get there. But I would say don't fear that technology right now. Embrace it.
Yeah, that's right, John. I think that people are looking at technology. They are reimagining, and the nonprofits that are doing that are creating distance between the other nonprofits that are not, right? That is the reality
Absolutely.
right now, is that there are organizations that are creating distance through technology, through reimagining their partnerships and how their organization is going to thrive in the future. So
Absolutely. They're playing to win. They're playing to win, Dean, and they're doing it. Yep.
The nonprofit motto: how to do more with less. Always want to figure that out. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Just want you to know, so I am doing short videos on the state of the industry. They'll be launching shortly on social media. They'll just be short, probably 2 to 3 minute questions videos that you'll see on all of our social media channels. It'll be more of discussions with clients and nonprofit experts here at Armanino, telling you what is going on in nonprofit these days. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you everybody for attending. Brenda, John, Dean, thank you so much for your insight this afternoon. As I close out, there will be a survey at the end. If you want to take a moment to give us some feedback, we'd greatly appreciate it. Enjoy your afternoon all.
Thank you.